You're listening to episode 181 of the Master Your Mind, Business, and Life podcast. I don't have to tell you this, but 2020 has been a whirlwind of a year. I was originally going to skip releasing a podcast this week, but it just really didn't feel right in my core. This is going to be a short episode, however, because, well, we're recapping the year. Plus, I am sharing what's to come for the podcast in 2021. Before I hit you with some intro music and before we dive into this episode, let's go over a review of the week. And it's the final review of the week of 2020. Whoop whoop! This week's review comes from Apple Podcasts from Corey, and it reads, "Best part is that Lauren is so real and authentic. She's truly living the life that she is helping others achieve, while also sharing her own obstacles and how she's overcoming them. Was also impressed with the production and listening quality." Well, thank you, Corey, for taking the time to leave such a kind review. I try to be as real as can be, as I believe there is no better self than your authentic self. To have your review featured on the podcast, drop your review on Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, or similar, and I'll be sure to highlight it. Your 5-star ratings and reviews help expand the reach of this podcast to get more people on track of ultimate life mastery. All right, are you ready to dive into this episode? You know what to do. Tune in, turn it up, let's go.
You're listening to Master Your Mind, Business and Life. Conversations with everyday world shifters, truth seekers, and rule breakers. Here's your host, Lauren Smith.
This past year was full of lessons, so many that it can be hard to focus on just one. My biggest lesson this year was in flow and grace. When we went into lockdown back in March, which feels like eternity ago, but also feels like yesterday in the same breath, what a weird year, you know? I can't really say that my personal world changed so much because I already work from home. So really the biggest change for me was having my kids at home with me. This required a new schooling flow for them, which also required a new flow for me. I will say that I thoroughly enjoyed my kids being home during lockdown, but I saw firsthand how it really rocked their worlds. My oldest became very secluded in the summer months. It was probably the palest I have ever seen my Florida girl in the summer months, mostly because her friends weren't allowed to hang out and they were all on FaceTime or they were gaming all day together, where I normally would have been pressed to get them off the electronics. I gave more grace. Recognizing that if this is what's keeping her connected, then that's okay. I also thought it was a little silly that when we went to her yearly checkup at her doctor's office, they asked me how much screen time she gets. I was like, really? Is this still a question in 2020? Like, kids are doing virtual school now. So I just thought, how wild things have changed from 2019 to 2020 in rank of importance. My youngest daughter, who is 6, she struggled in a different way. In May, our neighbor across the street moved away. They had a little girl the same age as my daughter, and those two played for hours upon hours together every weekend and most weeknights. They would sit in my garage with all their Barbie dolls and their baby dolls, whatever else that they could find, and they would allow their imagination to take them away. I had to learn how to flow a little bit more since her friend moved away because with the lack of friends on technology at her age, she's 6, she was really missing human connection. I had to learn how to play Roblox, which is not my favorite thing. Give me some old school Nintendo 007. But I also played Barbies. We played board games. And then I realized that every day was kind of like Groundhog Day, but their emotions varied. Thus, we flowed daily. And then when I lost patience or I felt like I just needed a minute, I gave myself grace. And when they lost patience or they needed a minute, I gave them grace. We hit the reset button a lot when, I would say even just the past year in general, but those summer months and I would say March until August, they were trying at times. So I'm just curious to know, how did you flow this year? How did you show up and give grace for yourself and for others? Really reflect on this. And maybe your year has been defined by other feelings and emotions. Loss is a huge one for many, and while I am in no way overlooking the substantial losses of 2020 because I've had people who have passed away, I personally want to focus on what I have gained. And I've gained more time with my kids than I would have typically had any other year since they've been in school, and to me, that was the best part of 2020. But let's talk about the highlights of the podcast in 2020 because we had a good year, you guys. So one of the coolest things that I got to do this year with the podcast was be part of Podcast Wellness Week presented by Podbean. Podbean is my podcast host, and I was over the moon when they not only asked me to be the moderator for the Love Your Body panel, but to also interview headliner Katie Morton. Many of our new listeners have joined us from Podcast Wellness Week, and I am just beyond grateful. When I go back and look at what resonated with you, the audience, the most this year, I've got to say that the numbers are super telling, and the topics, well, your favorite topics also double as my personal favorite topics. So I love that we can nerd out together and that we enjoy similar things. So the top 5 episodes in terms of download numbers this year was number 1, Twin Flame Energy Forecast with Happy Souls 1111. Number 2, Astrology Energy Update with Danielle Page. Number 3, the Numerology Forecast for 2020 with Felicia Bender. Number 4 was a Fuel Your Life Friday episode, oh hey, breaking down the 444 portal. And last but not least, Twin Flame Energy Update with K-Moon. 5 of my personal favorite conversations, in addition to the 5 that were listed, include my conversations with Jeremy Newsom, Dr. Dawson Church, Julie Ryan, Lindsay Brian Podvin, and Connor Moore. I could actually list seriously every single guest. I am not exaggerating. Every single guest I connected with on one level or another, and they have taught me so much. I walk away from every episode with a takeaway, and I hope you do too. We brought you 104 episodes to 153 countries. 52 of those episodes were Fuel Your Life Friday episodes, which seriously, these are so much fun to record. And as a little hint, I am bringing you a new series in 2021. And as another little hint, this series is all about stories from the soul. When it's ready to launch, you'll be the first to know. Even though I did a little recap episode today, this isn't all for 2020. On Friday, even though it's Christmas, I'm still dropping a Fuel Your Life Friday episode. And then next Wednesday, December 30th, numerologist Felicia Bender is joining us again for a final episode of the year, which also doubles as our first energy forecast for 2021. I cannot thank you all enough for joining me each week. This podcast adds a layer of love to my life. The words escape me when it comes to expressing my gratitude. I hope these conversations and weekly Fuel Your Life Friday episodes really aid in your emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and physical growth. I believe that we are all born with innate gifts, and it is our duty to share them with the world. Thank you for allowing me to share mine with you. I'll see you back here on Friday for a Christmas edition of Fuel Your Life Friday. But until then, remember, every level of life is an opportunity to grow. Be well, my friend.